The next section on the data entry sheet that we're going to discuss is the project timeline plan. This section is the most important section in all of the data entry that's needed for a real estate investment project. This section must be completed for all projects regardless of the strategy being used. This section is essentially just a list of tasks, and against these set of tasks, where appropriate, we need to specify which month the task will start in, and what the duration of these tasks will be. You will notice that there are two columns for the input data. The first column is for the start month, and this is the month that the project or the task will start in. The second column is for the duration, and this is the duration, in months, that the task will take. At the top of these two columns, there are two dates. Above the start month is today's date, and that date is taken from the system date, and above the duration column, there's the project start date, which is calculated from the system date. The date that is calculated would generally be the first day of the following month. This date is then used as the basis for converting the start month and the duration to real dates, which you see in the middle of the screen. One thing I would point out at this time is that as far as the feasibility study is concerned, dates are meaningless. Whether a project starts in September or January or December is largely irrelevant to the financial calculations, so the dates are unimportant. The information that is important is, when does the task start, and how long does it take, and that way the program can use this information to calculate things like interest costs with some degree of accuracy. This section, more than any other section in the data entry sheet, has a significant amount of programming behind it to make sure that the data you enter in the project timeline plan is consistent with the data that you've entered elsewhere in the data entry sheet. Starting with the first task, which is the settlement period on purchase, typically this would be the first thing that you would do in a project in real estate, and the start month typically would be month 1, and it would be the start of the project, and the duration of that task would usually be the settlement period on the purchase, so I have entered 2 as the settlement period on the purchase. This is not always the case, particularly if you're doing an options contract. Typically with an option you would be paying an option fee and incurring expense well and truly in advance of the purchase of the property. So in this case, and probably in this case only, the settlement period on the purchase may actually start in something like month 12, but typically in a straightforward project, the first function of any project is to buy the property, and that starts in month 1. The next task is the demolition of any existing structures, and in our example here, there is no demolition because we are intending to renovate the existing dwelling, so in this particular case we're able to leave these fields blank, but if a demolition was being undertaken, then what you may do, or what you may find, is that the demolition would occur immediately after the settlement period, or perhaps even after the development application has been approved. So the start month, if we were doing the demolition immediately after purchase, of this task would be month 3 and the duration would be 1 month. This entry is not significant as far as the financial calculations are concerned. The next 3 tasks relate specifically to the subdivision and sale of vacant blocks of land. In our project we intend to subdivide into 4 blocks, and one of those blocks will remain vacant and be sold as a vacant lot. So we need to complete each of the tasks with a start month and duration of each of the tasks in this section. If we were not doing any subdivision and sale of vacant blocks, then all of these tasks could be left blank. In our sample project we're going to assume that we would start the subdivision process as soon as we signed a contract for the purchase, and that would be the start month as 1, and the subdivision process would take an estimated 6 months, so we've got a duration of 6 months. The marketing of the properties would probably overlap the subdivision process, so therefore we would start the marketing campaign well and truly before the subdivision process is complete, and we would estimate that the marketing campaign would take 3 months. The settlement period would have to follow the subdivision process, and therefore, as we notice here, with the start month of 1, and duration of 6 months, that the settlement period on the sale could not start any earlier than month 7, and the duration on settlement is entered as 2 months. The next group of tasks relates specifically to the renovation and sale of any existing dwelling, and in our project we are intending to renovate the existing dwelling. Therefore we need to fill out a start month and duration for each of the tasks in this section. If the project that is being undertaken does not involve any renovations, then similar to the subdivision process, these can all be left blank. In this case we would anticipate starting the renovation immediately we had acquired the property, and therefore, following the start month of 1 for settlement, and a duration of 2 months, we would be able to commence the renovation of the existing structure in month 3, and we would anticipate that it would take 2 months. We had also intended to market and sell the property, and given that we would not be in a position to market the property until the renovation is complete, the marketing campaign for the renovated dwelling would not start until month 5, and potentially be on the market for 2 months. Following immediately after the marketing campaign, if we have achieved a sale, then that sale would start in month 7, and have duration of 2 months for the settlement. The next group of 4 tasks relates to the function of strata titling a single property into multiple titles for sale. In our sample project, this particular strategy is not being used and therefore all of the start months and durations are left blank, but if we were using this strategy and we were doing a strata titling of an apartment block, then we would need to complete start months and durations for each of these 4 tasks. The last group of 4 tasks is used specifically for defining the start month and duration of construction projects where we're going to construct new dwellings. In our sample project we're proposing to subdivide a property into 4, and build 2 new townhouses. Therefore we need to complete the start month and duration of each of these 4 tasks. The town planning application would start immediately we sign the contract for purchase, and therefore the start month would be 1 and the duration would be an anticipated 7 months, the same as we had entered for this process in the subdivision of the vacant land. The construction would immediately follow in month 8, and take approximately 6 months. While doing the construction we would start a marketing campaign, and therefore the marketing start month would be during the construction process and take an anticipated 4 months. Following the marketing campaign and the completion of construction, our settlement on sale would start in month 14 and take an anticipated 2 months. As usual, if there is no construction in the project, then all of these fields can be left blank. While that completes the important aspect of the project's timeline plan, there is another section on the right-hand side of the screen which relates specifically to the rent and other income and expenses that you receive or lose during the course of a project. The number of cells that are shown here as green will largely depend on the information that's provided in the start month and duration of each of these tasks. In our case the maximum project length is going to be 16 months and therefore 16 months are shown as green. If our settlement period for example were 4 months, then when we enter 4 as the settlement period, then you'll notice an additional 2 months became available in this section. This section is to allow for income and expenses that you may receive during the course of doing a project. For example, if you were doing this project and doing a renovation of a property and selling it, then you may choose to defer the renovation of the property until after the subdivision of the vacant lots has taken place and therefore, for a number of months, you may have a tenant in the dwelling and receive income during that period, and that period would probably be starting in month 3. For example, I'll just enter $1,200, you may receive $1,200 a month for a number of months. This section can also be used to record income that you lose during the course of a project. For example, if you were doing a strata titling of an apartment block that you already own, and dividing an apartment block up into multiple titles, then the chances are that during the course of the project you would have vacant apartments, and this would be a cost to the project, and in these cases these costs to the project can be entered as a minus, or a negative amount. Now that we have completed the data entry for the project timeline plan, we can go to the timeline sheet and at the top of the timeline sheet you'll see a relatively simple Gantt chart. To the left of the Gantt chart you'll see that the start months and durations have been repeated from the data entry sheet. These months are then represented by different colored bars across our Gantt chart and it shows us visually the interaction between all of these tasks and how they relate to one another. The full description of the project timeline sheet and cash flow analysis will be described in another video. Before we go back to the data entry sheet, I want to show a quick demonstration that highlights the need for accuracy in this section. As you will see I have copied the section of the timeline plan and have a row of boxes across the bottom. The boxes are just symbolic of monthly cash flow buckets. The program distributes the costs and income from the project into these buckets. In the first case, the pre-purchase costs are distributed over the first 2 months of the project. Next, the purchase costs are distributed with the deposit being paid in the first month, the balance on settlement being paid in the third month, and the stamp duty paid at a later date depending on the rules in each state. Then we have the renovation costs being paid over 3 months. An additional month is added to allow for deposits and trailing expenses. We then have the development application costs paid out in months 1 to 6 as per the numbers in the timeline plan. The construction costs are distributed as per the distribution specified in the data entry sheet. The program automatically calculates the GST input credits and returns these funds as income depending on whether monthly or quarterly BAS statements are filed. Any sales throughout the project are also added as income in the months of settlement on the sales. And finally, any GST liability on sales is deducted. Using this method, the program is able to develop an accurate picture of the project's cash flow in each month. Interest is then calculated on each monthly balance and carried forward into the following months. Any errors in the timing of payments will result in incorrect calculations for interest on loans and an inaccurate picture of the project cash flow. So now we will go back to the data entry sheet and complete the requirements of data entry for this project.